And the meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Dede from Georgia, go ahead.
Through the study of Christian Science in this church, I've had a number of tremendous healings, including ones that I wasn't consciously seeking. One of the greatest blessings I've received is the ability to feel God's presence more each day, as a result of praying continually for the ability to do so. I'm now able to go about my day with a sense of confidence, courage, and comfort, rather than feeling the uneasiness and anxiety that I once accepted as normal because I didn't know a better way. I'm grateful that I'm learning to live life with God, which is the only life worth living. And I'm thankful for the tools provided in this church that I'm able to take with me each day to meet the needs of the hour. I'm so grateful for all the work going on in this church. I can't be thankful enough. It's giving me all that I need to live a life with strength and courage and humility. Thank you so much again for tonight's reading, fairly, and for all the testimonies that will be given tonight.
Thank you. Barbara Orkan from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. In my mid-20s, being godless and very discouraged, I read Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking, followed by reading from the New Testament in Modern English by J.B. Phillips at Peale's recommendation, also praying 3 times a day. Several months later, I began looking for a church that was teaching what I had glimpsed in the New Testament. I kept looking, eliminating each church with only one visit, until I came to a Christian Science branch church, from which I took home a century of Christian Science healing. On the second visit there, I wanted Science and Health and borrowed it. In it, I glimpsed what I had glimpsed in the New Testament and continued attending the church and reading Science and Health. Healings of smoking, frequent headaches, and the tendency to have long-lasting colds in the winter soon followed. This I attribute primarily to the wonderful sense of God's love I found that I had not before experienced. Thanks be to God for Christian Science, for Mary Baker Eddy, through whom the revelation came and for whom I gained a better appreciation this last year, and for all of Plainfield Christian Science Church's work to make Christian Science better known and understood. Thank you, Fairly, for the wonderful readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
This past Christmas season was quite busy here at the church, and it makes me so grateful to be able to more clearly see how God was guiding me through all that needed to be done. Before coming to this church, and before having regular practitioner support, having so much to do would have been very draining on me. And yet now, with all I'm learning and experiencing here in Plainfield, the end of 2018 not only went incredibly smoothly, but it also left me feeling very refreshed and ready for whatever God might have me do next. What a wonderful working out this has been for me, and I give all the credit to God, Christian Science, this church, and practitioner support. What a constant blessing it is to be here. Thank you. And now I have a testimony from Diana, who is in Massachusetts.
Hello, this is Diana calling from Massachusetts. I have many things to be grateful for this week, but today I would like to express my gratitude about the watches. I'm really grateful for these watches. I always have been, but I've been doing them on my own. Being now in America, I can do these watches with you on your time. So I've tried it, and I've done this twice since I've been back. And each time I felt this really wonderful feeling of peace and security, and it just continued with me for quite a while after the watch was over. And I realized how powerful these watches are and how important they are. So I'll be going back to Europe this week, and I am planning to set the clock for the middle of the night when these watches happen and call in. I may not be able to do it every time, but I'm going to do it as often as I can because I do see the value in this for me personally, not just for the world, but really for me personally. It is a very powerful feeling, and I want to just suggest to others who are not in the time zone that makes this easy to do, to really, set your clock and try to consider joining us. It is a very, very powerful and wonderful feeling. I also want to express my gratitude for the weekly watch, which is number 259 in the 500 Watching Points by Gilbert Carpenter. Again, this week, the watch is about the channel of error and how to handle it. And I'm just going to, this is something that I've really needed and really need, and not making the, evil personal, taking, or, making it a person, but that person is merely a channel, and to love that person in spite of it. And so this I found very powerful that I'd like to share. When a person is exposed to being a channel for some phase of error, you do not see it as person any more than you would accuse a puppet of a malicious purpose if it should strike you. The one manipulating the puppet would be the malefactor in the case. Hence, when you see that it is mortal mind and not person that is responsible for error, your work against it becomes impersonal. Then, because you love the channel, you run no risk of arousing resentment in the individual in question, and thus having your efforts in the right direction hindered. So I'm just, again, using this very, very wonderful and practical and helpful instruction for handling error in a situation that's in my life right now. So I want to thank all of you for all that you do, and I'm just very grateful. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Luan from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. Never really thought of myself as having courage. I spent most of my life avoiding arguments and running away from problems or compromising just to keep the peace. But there never was any peace because I spent the rest of my time ruminating about what I should have said or done. I allowed others to control me, running around trying to please everyone. I would get angry for not having the courage to stand up for myself. I'm so grateful to God for my practitioner and all this church has to offer, which is teaching me to stand on principle and to know that I do not have to, or for the love of God, should not even just a little, compromise when it comes to principle. By holding steadfast to this ideal, I am gaining the courage to stay in the battle against false material beliefs and anything that does not represent God good. I'm grateful to Mrs. Eddy for Christian Science and for Jesus, the way shower. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, this is Bruce, and I had a wonderful blessing on Christmas Eve, the day of Christmas Eve, December 24th. This was at a time when I swore to myself that I would never go to a shopping mall or anything the week before Christmas. Next thing you know, it was the day of Christmas Eve, December 24th, that I needed to go to the store and buy something. But I just remembered hearing in our recent roundtable that God could do anything. There was nothing impossible to God. And, this lesson that we have this week that describes so beautifully how God is the only power and that he is all-powerful. So here I was in the middle of December 24th, the day thereof, and I needed to go to the store and buy something. And I found myself stopping, and I felt like thanking God for stopping me, because I knew what store I had to go to, except it was on a very busy highway next to a shopping mall, which is obviously very busy on that day. And the idea came to go to a different branch of that store, which is a little further away, but wasn't going to be so busy. So I did go there, the second one. I went into the store and went to the department that I needed, and there was an employee of the store working right there, almost as if this gentleman was waiting for me. I described to this gentleman the situation, what I needed. As it ended up, I needed to get 3 different things, and he took me to each one of them and showed me what it was very quickly. So I got in and out of that store in a matter of minutes. And I just found myself thanking God. There's nothing impossible to God. He can do all things. He can do all good. And I also felt like thanking God for holding me back from just dashing off quickly at first, because I ended up going to the second store where this beautiful blessing happened. Thank you, God. And thank you for Christian Science, which teaches us about him. Linda.
Good evening. Thank you so much for those readings tonight. I'd like to express my gratitude for the wonderful teachings that go on in this church that are so rich with practical, effective ways to use this science correctly. Recently, there was an instruction in our last round table, one of them, that said to make a list of all that God has done for you. I'm so grateful I did this because often the holidays bring up the past. And making this list and also using the article that was mentioned earlier on the Carousel of the New Year by Mary Singletary was helping me continue what I read where Mrs. Eddy says in Collectania, quote, "Store your mind with deep treasures," end quote. So making these lists made me more aware of all the junk I was still storing. And I don't want this to take up all the room in the thinking. And the thoughts I realized as we're reading this lesson this week to honor and love God, we're not honoring him. And any of it was not telling me he was all good. So now that I've been more aware of this, I've been making sure that I'm looking for God in everything and good and being grateful. And I also realized that I was thinking somehow there was bad then, but better or good now or getting better. And it's been so freeing to take the time to really start to cleanse my thinking and using this science to think correctly about God and his creation and myself. I'm very grateful for Christ Jesus, for Mary Baker Eddy, and for this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm so grateful to be learning that Christian Science is totally provable. It's totally practical. It really is a science. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I was scheduled to read the sermon, I guess you could call it, out of a Wednesday evening meeting. And I had prepared something that thought was going to be really good. Anyway, it felt inspired. Wednesday morning came along and I woke up with a sore throat. And I was tempted to think, if this gets any worse, I may not be able to read tonight. And then I caught myself and I remembered what I'd been taught in Christian Science. that this is an error. This is an evil. And it's never personal. And Mrs. Evans, many years ago, taught us early on that to be prepared for the devil to try to distract you on a Wednesday from working for the meeting that we're going to have. And I realized that there's nothing personal about this. This was an impersonal attack on the service of this church. Mrs. Eddy writes in Science and Health, when the first symptoms of disease appear, dispute the testimony of the material senses with divine science. And I remember in the Bible it says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. So I took that approach. I refused to accept this as anything that God would bring or ordain. I refused to accept that it had anything to do with me, but that it was an impersonal attack on this church and the service that this church provides. And I got really adamant in my own thought, in my own consciousness, that I wasn't going to have this. So I worked for a while to know that if God wanted me to read, he would give me the voice to read. And I would gladly do whatever God wanted. And I put the entire situation in God's hands, and I left it there. And I went on my business that day. The throat did not get more sore. It got less sore. And by the time the service was to begin, there was no soreness whatsoever. And I was able to read without any problems. I'm so grateful for Christian Science. I'm so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for giving us the key to the Scriptures, the key to life itself. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. And thank you for the readings tonight. They were really good.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you for those readings also. Humility is so important. And this holiday season, I'm sure, with the inspired readings that we've had and during services and the hymns that just stay with you, and a few lessons that I learned in the support of practitioner, I stayed healthy. I remarked on it because it's natural and normal to be healthy, but both people in my household, my wife and my son, both were succumb at certain points to colds, and in a simple way, I would try to talk of God's love and truth to them, and through all sorts of means, they finally got free. But I was able to stay healthy. I think also Martha Wilcox's article in Body, part of it was read by Jeremy. But our functions are really God saying, I am. And I started thinking more about being more of that God person and I had been working with, in addition to humility, meekness. Definition of meekness was to endure suffering and injury with patience and without resentment. So for the last couple of months, I've been trying to catch myself to always not to resent, and to have patience, no matter, what. And it's hard at times. I contribute that to me being more receptive to what Martha Wilcox was saying, and to have to only turn to a hymn or a truth to free myself from the heaviness or irritation of a mucous membrane for a moment. And I thank God for this place that really, really let me be more of an example to my household than just getting in the mud with them all. Anyway, thank you from Mary Baker Rady.
Thank you. Shahidat from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you so much for those readings tonight. Last week, a question arose in connection with a project that I'm working on at work. And the question threw me for a loop, and it threatened my serenity and my sense of peace. And I caught myself not spending the weekend worrying about it. It did try to aggressively enter my thought and make me worry and wring my hands over the issue, but I caught myself and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Because I remember very clearly it being mentioned at the round table that worrying is the same thing as devil worshiping. And I was surely not going to do that. And I prayed about the situation. I left it with God. And I returned to the office today. It was nice to see that the situation had resolved itself. I have learned from this church how to trust God with the issues and not wring my hands and feel like I have to solve everything with my own willpower. And that learning is invaluable. And I am very thankful to have learned that lesson here at this church. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chardell.
Oh, thank you for the readings. They're wonderful. I am so happy to be here and offer my gratitude to all the Plainfield Church Independent that God has so graciously provided and protected. As our calendar stated yesterday, count your blessings and trust God with your future. And also, stand in His presence unafraid. In praise lift up your voice. Be glad, give thanks. Rejoice. That's hymn 342. We all have a new life in Christ, and Christian Science teaches us how to do this. As a testifier said not too long ago, quote, Christian Science is not to make our lives problem-free, but to destroy the beliefs of sickness and sin for all mankind, and through our prayers and our good living to free us all to be what God made, perfect in His image. Let us go forward and give, that was an unquote. Let us go forward and give thanks.
Thank you. Laurie from Virginia, go ahead.
I thank God for a job that came when I had none, that gives me new people, new thoughts, and physical movement instead of sitting at a desk. I thank God for my practitioner who speaks to my heart, who reminds me God is love and demonstrates this, that God is perfect, therefore man is perfect, and error dissolves. Reminds me that the first commandment destroys animal magnetism and demonstrates the power of putting God first in everything. Thank you for this house, God, in the woods where my dog can run. Thank you for my Plainfield family who, through God's love, restores trust and love to me. And I find myself wrapped up in God's love so effectually, I'm never away from God's care. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol.
One of my favorite quotes from Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy is, a spiritual idea has not a single element of error, and this truth removes properly whatever is offensive. I had used that for like bodily ailments and that sort of thing, but recently I've been realizing how expansive that is. That also applies if there's somebody in my experience who is perhaps being a little grouchy or whatever. I can use it for that. If somebody is being critical, the same thing. If I'm not pleased with whatever situation is going on around me or that I find myself in, that as well. It's a spiritual idea. It's an idea of God, and it hasn't got a single element of error. And that truth removes properly whatever is offensive. We don't have to just endure it. We don't have to just, stiff upper lip our way through it. It's removed. God removes it. I am so very grateful for all the wonderful ways I've been able to use this statement and see it work in my life. I'm very grateful for this church and so grateful for Mrs. Eddy for giving us this wonderful way of life, and very grateful for practitioner support. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Fairly, for the beautiful readings and the powerful reminder to be humble. Thank you also for all the testimonies so far. I am so grateful to learn this imperative quality of humility. To me, this ability does help me to take myself out of things and know the overall governing power of God, and that gives me peace. It's meant to me that I am not the one struggling to make anything happen. I simply must stay awake to make sure I'm not getting ahead of God, not interfering with what He's doing, but following Him as He unfolds my life step by step in His perfect way. Whenever I have felt I was the one doing something, there were always assailing wrong thoughts, doubting thoughts. Only in God is there no contest. The surrendering to His laws, His guidance, is the only way. It made me think of the 3 wise men. They humbly followed. They were kings. He said they are being referred to as 3 kings from the Orient. And yet they went down in their own esteem, as the readings pointed out, stopped any figuring out themselves and followed, and were led harmoniously to where they needed to be. It is more peaceful, simply more peaceful to remain humble. Then we receive the might to resist evil and the joy to follow God's leading. I am so grateful to God, to Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy. They are wonderful examples for us all to be free in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening, everyone. I'll read one thing we have from the website bulletin board tonight. This is from Virginia. I've been listening to the Bible studies that are held at this church for quite some time, and all are wonderful. However, I have found the ones that have been presented recently, in which the focus has been on certain chapters of Revelation, and one in particular, which was held recently, entitled Emmanuel, God with Us, so interesting, as well as being very informative and helpful, and have offered so much to our progress in becoming a more effective student in Christian Science. I've listened to this particular one over and over and over and never tire of it. Each time I get a new thought from it. I had attended a few Bible study classes being held in a Christian Science church that I had been a member of a number of years ago, and I can honestly say that the Bible study classes of that church and the studies of the Plainfield Church Independent are in an entirely different league. These Bible studies are of the highest caliber, and I am so grateful and proud to be a member of this church and to have this incredible opportunity to be able to listen to and to learn. My gratitude goes out to all those who have participated and brought so much information and profound thought to these studies. Thank you so much. I'm grateful first to Fairly for those beautiful readings on humility, and read with great understanding. Thank you. And thinking about this, what was written here, and also what was mentioned about our unity watches, I'm grateful for the prayer that goes into what we do here in the church, because that's what makes it powerful. The one that spoke about the unity watches, she usually is in Europe, so doesn't join us live, but now she's in the United States and was able to join us live, and the peace and the power that she felt was tangible. And Mrs. Eddy says in Science and Health that whatever holds human thought in line with unselfed love receives directly the divine power. And any time we take up this work, we're working unselfishly, not for ourselves, but for all mankind. And in doing this, we are receiving directly the divine power. And you see, that would make for a mighty power and a mighty sense of peace, which is what she was feeling and what we all feel. Carpenter says that working for mankind is the Christian Scientist's life insurance. There's a lot of talk lately about life insurance, or about insurance. Anyway, so you see, and then he goes on to say, you cannot possibly be working on issues for the world without being greatly benefited yourself. That's not why we do it, but it is certainly a wonderful byproduct of what we do. So we take up these various issues each week, and also in our individual watches, and we handle it in our own thinking, make it nothing. And in doing that, we greatly bless the world, and we and all who our thought comes in contact with are greatly blessed. I'm so grateful for Christian Science. I'm grateful for the way of life that is taught here in this church, the practical application of it. Thank God for Mrs. Eddy for giving us this wonderful way of life.
Thank you.